So the primary role of JECFA is to perform risk assessments and provide advice on food safety. Those advice are for FAO, WHO, member countries, and Codex Alimentaris Commission. Advice provided to Codex Committee of CCFA for Food Additives, Codex Committee on Contaminant in Foods, and Codex Committee on Residue and Veterinary Drugs in Foods. So the Codex Alimentaris Commission, based on JECFA evaluation, developed their standards. So today we will focus on food additives and not on contaminants nor on veterinary drugs. So risk analysis, I repeat what my colleagues started at the beginning of this conference. So it is very important to take a look on the risk analysis principle in Codex Alimentaris Commission document. Those principles need to be applied consistently, transparently, and documented, comprising risk assessment, risk management, and risk communication. So the risk assessment need to have a clear scope, transparent expert selection based on scientific data, considering global data and acknowledging uncertainties. Risk management focused on consumer health protection first. It is a structured approach, and we need transparent decision-making, considering economic impact and developing countries' needs. And risk communication should promote understanding and transparency involving all interested parties. So I will skip this one. So for that, we need the risk assessment policy. And the risk assessment policy is part of Codex text. And when you look at this document, what is about risk assessment policy? What is the purpose of risk assessment policy? Is to ensure consistency, clarity, and transparency. So when we establish the risk assessment policy, we try to protect the scientific integrity of the risk assessment and offer guidance to balance value judgment, policy choices, adverse health parameters for presenting risk to human health, source of the data to be considered, and management of data gaps and uncertainty during the course of the assessment. So we can summarize the risk assessment policy in 3 components. We have the substantive component, procedural component, and interpretative component. So I will not develop all of them, but during the explanation of how JECFA meetings are organized, you will see some of those elements in developing risk assessment within JECFA. So let's try to continue with the JECFA meeting. So usually we say JECFA meeting, it is only convening experts from different countries, and we have a 10 days meeting, and after the 10 days meeting, we have a report. But it's more complicated than that. First, we need to have a Codex request or WHO or FAO request. We try to have give the priority to Codex committees. So we have questions raised during the meeting of different Codex committees. It is X-1, year X-1. After that, we need to plan the meeting and prepare the meeting, definition of the objective and the scope of the meeting, preparation of the background information, meeting with the consultants, and so on and so on. During the year X, we call for data and experts or monographers. I will explain after that the difference between them. And we have a series of pre-meeting online meetings to see the development of monographs, and these experts start to discuss between them to understand the evidence, to start the interpretation of evidence, and start writing the monograph. In year X+1, we convene the physical joint expert meeting when we have all the experts sitting together, and we finalize the reports, and we publish immediately the conclusion and the recommendation of the meeting. So later, 6-9 months later, we have the report that are published. And we report after that to the Codex and member states. So you see the process is complicated with different steps, and it will take from the question to the report to the Codex committees, you need almost 2 years. And I put here something very important. Before the Codex request, it is very important, the role of CTF, Codex Trust Funds, on building capacity of member states to engage them more on Codex activity. And we try to help them through CTF that countries can make specific requests for establishment or for development of new standards. So there's no meeting without experts. So what are the experts? Experts are first individuals serving in JECFA, and they are independent experts with different specialization. They come from many different countries and organizations, but act in their individual capacity. They are not representative of their country or their institution. This is very important when we select the experts, and it is stated clearly to them. And one part of the meeting, before we start the meeting, we need a declaration of interest. All the experts should provide us declaration of interest. What are the interests that we can include? Experts have worked for or have interest in this sponsoring company. Experts can have performed some of the studies to be evaluated. Experts can have recently been closely involved with preparing an evaluation of a compound for a national or supranational body. So we consider that before the meeting, and the reason for that is we need to have independent experts. And the declaration of interest and the analysis of the declaration of interest are published in the website before starting of the meeting for transparency. Declaration of interest. So according to our rule, the data used and discussion held at the meeting are to be held in strict confidence. Experts must accept this rule and confirm with signature that they will adhere to them. And on request, original documents must be returned. And the decision making, when we have different experts, we can have different interpretation of the evidence, but there is no vote. The decision should be made by consensus. If there is no consensus, minority opinion can be provided by the experts. Each meeting is different due to the variation of the agenda. The actual member and experts would vary from meeting to meeting. But to ensure this continuity, we have some experts, because in JECFA we have different type of experts. We have experts that are members of the Food Safety Panel, WHO Food Safety Panel, and the equivalent in FAO. So we first select experts from the panel, from the two panels, FAO and WHO. And that's why we call it joint committee, because you are bringing two panels together. So the member of the panels, they are selected by ourselves, depending on their availability and depending on the agenda. And in addition to that, we have experts, we call them temporary advisor. They work on the monograph, they do all the work, the gathering of the data, the starting writing the report, and the experts from the panel will review the work done by the temporary advisor. So JECFA generally meet twice a year. At least one meeting examines food additives and or contaminants. The second meeting of the year may examine veterinary drug residues. Okay, so and one of the rules that are part of the risk assessment policy is the core principle of scientific advice. We have key principles: soundness, need for scientific excellence, responsibility, accountability, safeguard the integrity of the process, consider experts answerable for their views, objectivity, neutrality of the expert and advice, fairness, conduct of the process, respect of all participants for each other and for their scientific views, transparency, the mechanism that ensure the process and advice are clearly understandable to others, and inclusiveness, group balance, minority scientific opinion, balance of required skills and expertise. So this is the organization, but now when we have those experts, selected independent experts, we explain to them how to work together, we need to do the assessment. So the assessment is a classic risk assessment approach. Risk assessment approach with the different components: hazard identification, hazard characterization, exposure assessment, and risk characterization. Just to let you know that the hazard identification and hazard characterization are the responsibility of WHO panel experts, and the exposure assessment is a shared responsibility between FAO and WHO members of the panel. And risk characterization is the sum of all the components together, and it is shared by FAO and WHO experts. I didn't put here one very important part of the scientific assessment is the specification evaluation, which is done mainly by FAO panel. So when we develop the safety assessment, one of the main outputs is the establishment of acceptable daily intake, ADI, based on OIL. An ADI is calculated using safety factors to account for uncertainties. ADI is expressed in milligram per kilogram of body weight per day. So the ADI is the responsibility of JECFA, and all the process on making decision on ADI is the responsibility of JECFA. The ADI is provided to the Codex committee, and based on the ADI, the CCCFA will develop the international food standards. So JECFA provides recommendation on the safe level of use of food additives, but it is not responsible for these safe levels, just recommendation. Specification for the identity and purity are established to ensure consistency and safety of the additive. This is very important, as Dr. Fan presented on GMP, good manufacturer practice for the food additives. So publication are very important. JECFA reports and publication are freely available. I put here the website, and we have, for the same meeting, we have 3 types of documentation or publication: WHO Technical Report Series, FAO JECFA Monographs, and WHO Food Additive Series. So sometimes you are lost, but there is a lot of publication, and I can confess that we need to put more effort on how we deliver those scientific advice, because at the end, they are very systematic evaluation of the safety, taking into account different type of data. And for transparency, we are publishing everything, but I think we need to find another way on how to better deliver for different type of use of the scientific advice, so that the scientific advice will be understood clearly by the majority of the stakeholders. Review and update is very important. Regular review and re-evaluation of food additives are conducted as new data become available. Revision may be made to the ADL or other safety recommendation based on new scientific evidence. So who launched the review? The review can be launched by or asked by the Codex committee, or by the scientists themselves, or by WHO and FAO. knowing that new data are available. So key consideration in JECFA evaluation. So we are using toxicological studies that are essential for determining the potential health effects. They include short-term, long-term, and specific study on carcinogenicity, genotoxicity, reproductive and development toxicity. So we use what you call the ADME data, absorption, distribution, metabolism, and excretion is very important. We use in vitro studies, mechanistic studies, animal studies, and human studies. So you see, you have specialists in different domain of toxicological effects, domain on we have more experts, more familiar with mechanistic studies. We have experts more familiar with animal studies and other with human studies. So all those studies are analyzed in a very systematic way. We look at the quality, we look at the quality of the data, what are the consistency of the outputs of the different studies, and we put them together to end up with a general conclusion about the hazard identification, and after that we go to the hazard characterization, and of course we go to the exposure data, are very important to accurately estimate the dietary intake from various food sources is very important. And now I just show you the communication. One, as Dr. Fine said, some of the hot topic was last year about the evaluation of aspartame. So as you can see, I show you two different types of communication. This is the institutional communication, because we did the evaluation both by JECFA and IARC, and we communicate in our website. We put we clarify the evidence, we clarify the decision of both IARC evaluation and JECFA evaluation, and in addition to that, with the press conference, we highlight some of the uncertainties. And you can see from the other side, aspartame may cause concern global health body states. Okay. So this is another interpretation, which is completely different from the conclusion from JECFA and IARC. And we spend a lot of time to explain the rationale and explain the conclusion of the safety evaluation. And this brings me to explain, I think it's very important in this meeting that I explain the role of JECFA versus the role of IARC assessments. So IARC is the International Agency for Research on Cancer, independent organization, but part of WHO. So first of all, IARC is not doing the food risk assessment. They are doing only cancer hazard identification, considering all type of exposure. However, JECFA is doing as well hazard identification. All toxicological effects are considered, but only the toxicological effects that occur following dietary exposure. So, for example, we are not looking at the occupational exposure when we are evaluating JECFA food additives. However, IARC, if I can take the example of titanium dioxide, JECFA is looking only the effect after absorption and ingestion of this food additive. However, IARC can see what are the exposure when we are producing the food additives or when we are manufacturing the food additives. So they are looking for other type of exposure, not only dietary exposure. And their role stop at saying, is there any association or causality between exposure to food additives and cancer? Please. However, JECFA will look at cancer in addition to all other toxicological effects, followed by hazard characterization that provide the ADI, acceptable daily intake, and exposure assessment, only dietary exposure, and risk characterization. So, and there was a lot of debate. IARC is not so rigorous or not doing the same work as JECFA evaluation. This is not true, because when you look at the process of IARC, you can see here they are doing and they are using the same body of evidence. They have a subgroup that look at the exposure in humans. They have a subgroup on cancer in humans. They have another group, cancer in animals, and another group in mechanistic evidence. And they put all together for overall evaluation. This is what we are doing, but we are not organized in the same way. So what is different from IARC and JECFA when it comes to evaluation of cancer? IARC is doing its preamble. And preamble is a very interesting approach because it standardized the way of evaluating the evidence. And the evidence are classified insufficient, limited, inadequate, and ESLSC, that means there's no evidence at all. Those evidence syntheses are made in a certain way. In JECFA, we do them in a different way, but we don't have a strict procedure for it. And let me explain this preamble of IARC. So they look at evidence of cancer in human, evidence of cancer in experimental animals, and mechanistic evidence. So if you have sufficient data of cancer in humans, it is enough to classify the carcinogenic in group 1. This agent will be called carcinogenic and belong to group 1. Another situation, if you have sufficient experimental animal data and strong mechanistic evidence, so you can as well decide to classify the agent in group 1. Next group, probably carcinogenic, group 2A. So you can see, you can decide it because you have limited evidence of cancer in human, sufficient evidence in experimental animals, or you have limited evidence in cancer in humans and strong mechanistic evidence. So just to show you how we end up with 2A. But in the example of aspartame, it was classified as possibly carcinogenic group 2B. You can see here it was based only on limited evidence of cancer in humans. And group 2B can be decided if you have only sufficient evidence of cancer in experimental animals, or if you have only strong mechanistic evidence. So just to show you the three other possibilities to classify on 2B. So this was misleading in our communication because possibly carcinogenic was not well understood. Or when you look at the evidence as they were interpreted by the two committees, IARC committee and JECFA committee, are in total agreement. But the way to explain the strength of evidence are different, and that's why outside the two committees, we see that there is disagreement between them. So when we are saying possibly carcinogenic, that doesn't mean that we have causality, and we show that there is causality between consumption of aspartame and cancer. However, this brings certain uncertainty, so there is a lot of uncertainties, and when the substance is classified in group 2B, it is maybe a call for researchers to better understand the mechanism or better understand what happened in experimental animals or have more evidence of cancer in humans. So all together, looking at the two approaches, they are similar, but the only thing that we don't have in JECFA, we don't go to classification of the agents. However, IARC needs to end up their assessment in classifying agents in group 1, 2A, 2B, or 3. So, finishing that, I think that for the moment, our way to evaluating the food additives is following a very strict scientific process. Using scientific evidence is not about opinion, is about evidence. And we are looking for the uncertainty, and it is a cross-disciplinary approach. We use scientific experts. However, we are facing increased complexity, because when we evaluate a product, is not the same thing that we first evaluated. Because when we evaluate food additives, we are, at the first time, we are maybe looking on animal data or mechanistic data. There is no exposure to human, and perhaps some of the adverse effects that we do not observe in animals will occur after 10, 20, 30 years of exposure. And this will complicate the way of doing it, and we need to rely on more innovative approach on doing the safety assessment.